They just didn't pollute the land. We lost our way of life.
Tonight, Pictou Landing celebrates the countdown to shutting off toxic effluent from reaching Boat Harbour. The trial begins for a BC man facing charges alleging assault of sexually exploited women.
I grew up seeing Inuit written by a non-Inuk perspective, and I started to believe those perspectives.
And the Arctic's only Inuktitut publisher kicks off a month to celebrate the dominant language in Nunavut. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. After 50 years, Pictou Landing First Nation on Nova Scotia's coast is getting their harbour back. Northern Pulp Mill has been dumping its waste into Boat Harbour, and in a year it's going to stop. Angel Moore has the story.
Pictou Landing First Nation is celebrating the one-year countdown to the closure of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility. The school's gymnasium was full of people wearing red T-shirts with the name Aseg, meaning the other room. It's the original name of the harbour. They called it that before waste was in the water. Chief Andrea Paul thanked the crowd for their support and shared her personal experience.
You know, to live in an area where we are surrounded by water and to not have the same freedoms that our people did 52 years ago.
The toxins in the water released by Northern Pulp Mill killed more than the fish. It also affected the culture and the economy. Tracy Denny says people had to move away, but some eventually returned.
Once Boat Harbour came into effect and the effluent started coming over, they just lost everything, and community members left the reserve because they felt there was even nothing more to stay, and the only time they came back was in coffins.
A memorial wall with the names and photos of people were posted at the back of the gym. They did not live to see the closure of the facility.
We have been going to the cemetery, and we wrote down all community members who were living before 1967, which is when the treatment facility opened, and who passed afterwards. And the whole point is that they're going to be here with us in spirit.
Elders remember life before and after the harbour was polluted. Mary Nichols says her family lost their culture, their home, and they were displaced.
Well, when our land got polluted, they just didn't pollute the land. We lost our way of life. I grew up in the time, I learned from my mom. And after Boat Harbour happened, I couldn't do the stuff she taught me.
The community fought for years to stop Northern Pulp Mill from dumping, and Paul is confident the facility will finally close. She says the provincial government is listening to the public.
People are looking after the next 7 generations. They are making sure that all of this is protected, and you know, we are the right holders, right? We're not a stakeholder. We are a right holder.
Northern Pulp Mill says they need more time to prepare for the closure, but the Premier is standing firm. At a press conference, Stephen McNeil says there will be no extension to the 2020 closure.
The deadline is a deadline. It's the January 31st of 2020. We gave them 5 years.
If Northern Pulp refuses to stop dumping into the harbour, the province promises to shut them down.
We'll be shutting off the pipe, so we have the ability to close off that. They just won't be putting it into Boat Harbour.
Northern Pulp proposed to dump their waste in Northumberland Strait, which immediately drew protest on land and sea. The company has not yet found an alternative treatment facility site. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Pictou Landing First Nation.
To British Columbia, a trial begins today in Maple Ridge where Curtis Sagmoen is accused of assault against a sex trade worker. Here's Tina House with that story.
No more stolen sisters! No more stolen sisters!
Advocates calling themselves the MMIWG Drone Search Team traveled to Port Coquitlam to rally outside of the courthouse. They're here for the first day of trial for Curtis Wayne Sagmoen. He's charged with assaulting a sex trade worker with a hammer. This is his 12th charge of assault against women.
We formed the drone search team in relation to missing and murdered women that were starting to appear in the Squamish Nation area. starting with Caitlin Potts. And so we've been following the issue and calling for accountability.
RCMP say that on January the 6th, 2013, at this Maple Ridge townhouse owned by Curtis Sagmoen, neighbors heard a woman screaming for help and they ran to the scene.
He was lying on the ground and he was over top of her, not on top of her, but over top. And yeah, she was bleeding and screaming.
Although the woman hasn't been identified in this latest trial, this RCMP report corroborates the neighbor's story that she was attacked with a hammer. Just 4 years later, in October of 2017, RCMP conducted a massive search on this farm belonging to Curtis Sagmoen's parents. It's on Salmon River Road, just outside of Salmon Arm, BC. And in November of 2017, they discovered the body of 18-year-old Tracy Genero. He's also suspected in the disappearances of 4 other women from the area. For Jody Leon, whose team has attended every court appearance for Sagmoen since his arrest, she's angry that there still hasn't been any charges in the death of Genero.
Why would over a year go by and that family still doesn't know what happened to their daughter?
Curtis Wayne Sagmoen also faces 2 new charges in 2 separate incidents close to the Salmon River Road property. One is assault with a deadly weapon, and the other one is assault. He goes to court for those charges on February the 19th, 2019. Tina House, APTN National News, Port Coquitlam.
The federal government has announced a $10 million program to honor the lives and legacies of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The commemoration fund was one of the interim recommendations by the commissioners for the national inquiry. The money is to go to Indigenous governments and organizations to work with families and communities on commemorative activities and events. The government says the fund will contribute to healing, increase public awareness, and honor those who have been lost. The deadline to submit an application to access the funds is March 28th.
To extend that we listen with our previously submitted during my testimony.
We need to take a short break, but when we come back, a winter festival in the nation's capital kicks off with some Indigenous flair. Stay with us. Starting off in the East Coast, we've got 5 in Charlottetown and cloudy, and 0 and sunny in St. John's. Inuktitut clear and -27. Nain is -16 with a mix of sun and clouds. Chibougamau snow -14, 5 and rain in Montreal. -2 in Sarnia and London and snow. Peterborough is mostly sunny with -1 and -13 in Sault Ste. Marie. -19 in Sioux Lookout, -16 and clear in Thunder Bay and Wawa. Puckatawagan's in at -28 in snow. The Pas is -24 in snow. -21s for Gimli, Winnipeg, and Princess Harbour, Barons River, and snow. -23 in clear in Saskatoon, -22 in snow in Regina and Yorkton and Estevan. -32 in sunny in Stony Rapids, -25 in snow in La Ronge. Welcome back to developing news in Western Canada, where at least 3 people are dead after a Canadian Pacific freight train derailed near the Alberta-BC border early this morning. New footage shows the shocking damage. A spokesperson says between 40 and 60 cars carrying grain jumped the tracks. Officials have confirmed that the deceased were crew members on the train. A full investigation is underway. The incident happened in Field, BC, which is about 200 kilometers west of Calgary. A church that predated the First World War burned to the ground on the Papikassis First Nation in southern Saskatchewan. As CTV's Nathaniel Dove tells us, it's the second church to go up in flames within a year.
More than 100 years of history consumed by flames in a matter of hours. The Papikassis Roman Catholic Church, built in 1901, has been reduced to a pile of rubble and ash. It happened early Friday morning. A few hours later, Tim Dieter arrived to inspect the site that had once been central to his family.
And I have family buried here too, lots of them, So, yeah, it hurts me to see this happen. It probably hurts everybody else too.
For some, the church was a symbol of community. For others, of religious oppression.
As a person that participates in a lot of traditional ceremonies, I think that this is really an indication that that good things are going to happen in our community.
Patricia Dieter says 2 generations ago, her family was divided by different religions introduced to the reserve.
And because of those differences, they didn't speak to each other for years. It was almost forbidden by the church for them to have much to do with each other.
This is the 3rd church on Treaty 4 territory to burn in the past year. Last June, a fire claimed the United Church, also at Pepikissis. And in November, the Catholic Church at Cowassis was destroyed. The trend is disturbing to some, and File Hill Police Chief Leonard Bush says he is considering all potential causes and is not ruling out arson.
It's certainly in the back of our mind, given the fact that we had a fire here, another fire at a church this year, or within the last year.
The historic building is gone, but a more recent Catholic church still stands next to the ruin. Some here see that as a very mixed metaphor. For now, Police Chief Bush has called the trend concerning, and investigations into all 3 fires are still active. Nathaniel Dove, CTV News, Pepikissis First Nation.
Former Member of Parliament and Premier of Alberta Jim Prentice was honoured at the Alberta Legislature today. The 16th Premier of Alberta's portrait was unveiled in front of friends, family and colleagues. Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation Chief Tony Alexis sang an honour song for the former Premier who died in a plane crash in 2016. Alexis told those who gathered that Prentice was a friend of his and a friend of the Indigenous people of Alberta.
Jim Prentice was one of the first premiers to visit and engage with many of our First Nations and become an advocate for bettering relationships between the province and the Indigenous peoples. Although we didn't agree on all issues, Prentice was respected in our community for his compassion and commitment to First Nation matters. Since his passing, we continue to pray for him and his family.
The northern Alberta hamlet of Fort Chipewyan is only accessible by road in the winter months. The rest of the year, goods need to be flown in. Like most northern communities, high prices mean residents often struggle to put food on the table. But a First Nation-owned grocery store has changed that. Tamara Pimentel has the story.
Fiona Cardinal and Trevor Tremblay have been employed at the Kaiteli Market since it opened its doors in August 2018. The store has since been a lifesaver to the remote hamlet of Fort Chipewyan.
You don't have to go out of town as much to go and get certain things.
Especially people with low income, it helps them out a lot of people. A lot of people that can't get out to the community, out from McMurray to buy groceries. It helps them.
Kaiteli means people of the land of the willow in Dene. The $7 million store is owned by the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation with the vision of having healthy food options. Band councillor Michelle Voyager says since it opened, 15 jobs have been created and community members are saving money.
One of our band members told us that he's a single parent with 2 children, and he figured in the first 6 weeks of operations, he saved himself about $1,400. So band members, community members are saying we're saving money. We're able to do other things like get to the bush and go out and enjoy the land because they have some extra funds to do that.
So how does the store keep the costs down? Chief and council say things like fresh produce and milk are subsidized through Nutrition North, and they aren't trying to make a profit off the store at a rapid rate. Fort Chipewyan is only accessible by road in the winter months. The rest of the year, groceries need to be flown in. Before Kaiteli, residents here didn't have many options. They could travel to Fort McMurray, almost 300 kilometers away, or there's the northern store, owned by the Northwest Company. But residents say 2 bags of groceries would cost as much as $70. And fresh produce? Well, there wasn't much.
I got 4 kids, so, to pay $16 a jug of milk, I have to put, bread and butter on my table. So we're here paying $8 for up to 4-liter milk is awesome. I loved it.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Fort Chipewyan.
February is Inuktitut Language Month, and to celebrate, the only independent publishing company in the Arctic hosted a Meet the Author event in Iqaluit. So let's meet an author. Here's Kent Driscoll with one.
It was a full house for a Meet the Author event in Iqaluit over the weekend. Inhabit Media is the only independent publisher in the Arctic. Established in 2006, almost all of their titles are published in English and Inuktitut, and they have more than 130 titles in their catalog. They threw the event, and they brought their talent with them. Aviak Johnston is a rising star among that talent. Her first book, a young adult novel called Those Who Run in the Sky, won the Indigenous Voices Award for English prose. She's working on a sequel, expected this year. She also wrote a children's book, What's My Superpower?
So What's My Superpower is a book I wrote for my friend's daughter who, there's a video around of her wearing a cowboy hat and a cape, and she's saying, I'm a superhero, but I don't know what my superpower is.
For Johnston, Inuit authors writing for Inuit youth is important. And just look around. A room packed with Inuit youth who think they're having fun, not learning.
I grew up seeing Inuit written by a non-Inuit perspective, and I started to believe those perspectives, and it didn't really, I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense, so I started wanting to write my own stories.
February is Inuktitut Literacy Month. This event is just a kickoff. If the strong turnout to meet the authors is a sign, the future looks good. And maybe the next Aviak Johnston is right here in this room, being inspired. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
We need to take a short break, but we still have more news to come. Here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to northern Alberta, we've got minus 26 and sunny in High Level, minus 26 and sunny in Fort McMurray, minus 26 in Edmonton and Red Deer, and sunny there, minus 24 and sunny in Calgary, minus 1 and sunshine in Campbell River, minus 7 and sunny in Penticton, minus 18 clear in Dease Lake, minus 18 and snow in Prince George, minus 22 in sunshine in Old Crow and Mayo, and minus 16 in Whitehorse. Minus 21 and sunny in Norman Wells. Wrigley's minus 28 and snow. Tuck is in at minus 21 with clear skies. Minus 23 in Paulatuck. Minus 25 in snow in Colville Lake. Minus 32 in sunshine in Cambridge Bay. Minus 27 for Baker Lake and Chesterfield. Arctic Bay is in at minus 29 in clear. Clyde River minus 22 in clear. And Pangerton's minus 18 with clear skies. Welcome back. We head south now to Australia. The Indigenous people of that continent do not have any treaties, and as our friends at National Indigenous Television report, they are not always impressed at the forms of intergeneration or international recognition other people from other countries have either.
Check the dictionary, and recognition is defined as the acknowledgement of the existence, validity or legality of something. The question in Australia right now is, how is legal recognition given to First Australians, and are there lessons in the experience of Indigenous peoples across the globe?
It's like looking in the mirror at other people who have faced similar stories and struggles such as us. Like usually, lands were invaded, people were dispossessed, put onto missions and reserves.
In New Zealand, 7 national parliamentary seats are reserved for Maori representatives. In the United States, there is an Indigenous National Congress. Raymond Orr is an Associate Professor of Native American Studies at the University of Oklahoma.
We do have a National Congress of American Indians, but that's not supposed to govern tribes, but supposed to broker the relationship between and represent the interest as lobbying group for tribal nations to Congress and other entities in Washington.
A treaty is a common form of recognition, and among others, they have been adopted by Canada and the United States. In America, they've been negotiated with tribes with mixed results.
These treaties have existed as a way to kind of remove separation and separate and separate. So they're rarely using treaties to try to be incorporated into something. My tribe's a bit of the citizen Potawatomi, or originally from the Chicago area, a bit of an unusual one because we wanted a treaty to recognize that we were also citizens, so that you became known as a citizen Potawatomi. But generally, it's been about moving away from things.
In New Zealand, there is the Treaty of Waitangi. It too has supporters and critics.
We've heard often that the Treaty of Waitangi is not worth the paper it's written on sometimes. You know, I've heard that from a lot of people, particularly Maori people. But at least they say it is a bargaining tool, it's a leverage tool. They have it there within their structures and they can, you know, point to that. And, you know, that's really fantastic.
In New Zealand and in Canada, they have now made very recently strong statements about how they will respect and advance the rights of Indigenous peoples, how they respect the treaties and interpret the treaties in such a way that it benefits Aboriginal peoples who signed on those treaties. We see that they have courts and public inquiries and so on, which will deal with questions of that nature. This is not so much in Australia. In Australia we have some positives. I haven't mentioned them all, but in Australia there is a problem about taking that big step to give more autonomy and a stronger voice to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Despite Australia remaining the only Commonwealth country without a treaty, it did help progress the push for recognition globally in 2007 by voting yes at the United Nations General Assembly to adopt the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
The important thing for Indigenous peoples, and was agreed with the states, is that as Indigenous peoples we have the right to our own identity. We have rights which continue from our occupation of countries and territories as the First Peoples. We have the right to continue our cultures, our traditions, our laws, and we also have the right to our own governance and our own development.
While Australia may seem behind the times in terms of the lack of formal legal recognition of its First Peoples, the debate about doing just that does feature prominently in the national conversation. To overseas observers, Australia may even be ahead in some aspects of less formal, cultural or symbolic recognition.
Presidents are not concerned about presenting images of Native peoples, are not interested in somehow meeting with tribes as much and have this kind of ceremonial exchange. There's some good images of it, and there's historically been around, but I don't get a sense anything like Australia, right? There's no way that they would fly Indigenous flags in the same prominent place that they do in Australia. Now, we may put Native flags on university campuses who are nearby, but there's not that. It doesn't look like that at all.
Well, that's your news for this Monday. If you feel like you've missed anything, you can always catch up on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Melissa Ridgen, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.